What up, everybody? Happy freaking hump day.
Yeah.
The Giants Collective is back. It's just the boys tonight. Our girl is enjoying herself over in Germany. I'm sure she's enjoying the country much more than she did the game. But it's always good to have Anthony from Fireside Giants. Of course, Chris, the Entertainah talking sports. And I am Bad Dog, if you didn't know. So, gentlemen, we are 2-8.
Yeah.
Looking fantastic.
Right.
I mean, best team in the league. We're really close.
We're as close as they get.
Really close. So since we were talking a little bit about it before we went live, Anthony, we'll start with you. What did you take away from Joe Schoen's press conference?
I didn't take away a whole lot other than, like Chris said before we went live, he's a good politician. He knows how to say certain things to appease certain people, but he's not very truthful in his assessment of the team is the way that I feel about it. I thought that he deflected a lot of the questions. He tap danced around them. And I've been saying this, I've said it several times on this show. I've been saying it for weeks, months, maybe even years now on Fireside Giants. I'm tired of the company lines that this team just keeps handing to the media and force feeding to the fans. I wish that they would give a window of insight into the organization so that we can know that they are trying to get on the right track. But him sitting there and preaching, we're not far off. We lost some close games this year at 2-8, bottom of not the division, bottom of the NFL. Just rubs me the wrong way. It pisses me off. Like, they do nothing to indicate that they are trying to right this ship in these media sessions. And in fact, they try and sell lies to the fans. And I've just about had it. And I hope that the rest of Giants fans have had it as well.
Chris, what was your take from Mr.
Yeah, well said, Anthony. Listen, I'm not going to kill Joe Schoen for being a politician because that's like half of his job. And I get it. And we're fed up as fans. I am listening to it because I know half of the things he says are bullshit. But in a way, I get that that's kind of what he has to say. He's not going to throw his players under the bus. He's not going to throw his coach under the bus. So I get it. But to go out there, and as we were talking before the show, to go out there as a general manager and try to sell the fan base on that you're close. This team hasn't been close since they won their last Super Bowl. I mean, you could argue a year here, a year there, where they had the unexpected year in, 2015, where we made the playoffs, 2022. But even that was with smoke and mirrors, as we found out over the last 2 years with Daboll and Schoen. We're not close. Like, I see a lot of fans on Twitter saying, oh, we've got pieces. We've got the offensive line. First off, the offensive line, I'll believe it when I see it. I need to see them, Joe, over the course of a full year. I liked what I saw in Neal. I'm sure we'll talk about that on the show today. He did a really good job in his first game back, granted against the Carolina Panthers, but I'm going to give him credit where it's due. It's good to see that he grew. It's good to see that the Giants were patient with him this year and brought him into a situation where they thought he could be successful. So that's one big positive to take out of last week. But the offensive line still got a long way to go. The defensive line, well, the pass rush has been really good most weeks. We're among one of the league leaders in sacks. We may even still lead in that category. The run defense is still abysmal. We are the worst red zone offense in the NFL. And 2 years ago, we were top 5 in that category, which is why we made the playoffs in the first place. And I see a lot of people on Twitter saying, well, the Giants are pretty close. All they need to do is replace the quarterback. Well, if that's the definition of being close, if you as a Giants fan feel that a 2-8 football team who currently are tied for the worst record in the NFL are close and all they need to do is replace a quarterback, Well, by that definition, Joe Schoen, if that's accurate, which I don't necessarily think it is, but if that's accurate, that would make every team in the NFL close. Okay, because the Giants right now are the worst team in the NFL. So if you're convincing yourself as a fan that we're just a quarterback away, we're close. You could say that about every team in the NFL. So I took what he said as bullshit, but it's necessary bullshit. I get it that he's a politician. We're not close. And it's sad to say that as a Giants fan going into what will be year 4 of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. We're not close.
Let me play devil's advocate for a minute. If we had, I talked about this last night in the NFC East roundtable with the guys. If we had Jalen Hurts, and I don't think Jalen Hurts is great by any stretch of imagination. I think he benefits from having great talent around him. How many more games do we win if we have Jalen Hurts? How many of these? Now, we have been close in some games, and we have been really crappy in the red zone. I get Joe Schoen's a bullshitter. We saw it on Hard Knocks when they asked him about Barkley. He's like, well, I want to say blah, 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 but I'm going to say blah, 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 blah. So we know that's his job. He can't come out and go, we suck. That's our job. We blow hard, all right? We are ass with a capital S. But if we did have a competent quarterback, because Daniel Jones is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league.
One of the bottom 5. There's no doubt.
If we had an average quarterback, how many more games do you think we would have won? I mean, I don't think we're 2-8 if we have an average.
Yeah, I think 4 or 5 wins if we had an average quarterback. Okay. I think that's fair.
Same.
So we'd be 5-5.
Maybe, probably at best 5-5. Yeah.
So I mean, I get 2-8. Listen, I'm as frustrated as anybody else.
Yeah.
But truth be told, if we had a playmaker quarterback, we might actually be closer than our record appears, if that makes sense. I mean, even last year, we saw Tommy DeVito come in here and win 3 games. We saw Tyrod Taylor smash the Eagles. And we saw Tyrod Taylor be 1 yard away from beating the freaking Buffalo Bills. And we saw the Giants were 1 yard away from beating the Jets. I mean, literally, they could have won, and they could have beat the Rams. I mean, that was a really bad team last year that somehow could have won 9 games. So, well, I know Joe Schoen likes to feed us a lot of bull. I know he does, and pretty much every GM is going to do that. I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not even hating him for it.
I understand, but I'm saying, I guess, I know a lot of people that did rub the wrong way because our record sucks, and we've sucked for years. This is nothing new. This isn't just an aberration. We're having a down year. We have been a bad team for it, much longer than Joe Schoen's been here. But I'm wondering, again, we're not close to a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
but I think if we had a quarterback that is at least average, I do think at this point we're probably 5-5. I do think we beat Cincinnati. I do think we beat Washington in the first game. I do think we beat Dallas. If we have those, we might have even beat Pittsburgh. I mean, Daniel Jones, we would have beat Carolina. I mean, you can't play worse than Daniel Jones played against freaking Carolina, the worst defense in the league. This guy has a 50.1 quarterback rating. And people want to get on Brian Daboll about the play calling. Okay. Chris, you and I did the game. Yep. We saw the flea flicker. We were talking about this time to play action and take a shot. And it was a great play call. And 2 guys are wide open, jumping up and down. And he takes a sack. What the hell is he doing?
Yeah.
Which is going to lead me to my next point. And we talked about this when we started this show a few weeks ago. Chris, as Daniel Jones played his final snap for the New York Giants.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and we've been talking about that. I think Anthony talked about it as well when we talked about it on the show a couple of weeks ago. We've been saying that since really the start of the year. If the team was really bad, we thought they would make the transition after the bye week. It only made sense. It would give the backup an extra week to prepare. You have an extra week to just transition the mindset of the football team. The only, I'm trying to think, because I think most of us agree that Dan Jones probably doesn't see the field going forward for the rest of the year, or at least that's a strong possibility. I'm trying to think the reason why Daboll would leave him in. And the only thing that I could think of rationally why Daboll would leave him in at this point is if he felt like he was coaching for his job and if he legitimately felt like Daniel Jones gave him the best chance to win. But even if that's true, it's so marginal. It's not like the offense. I think it's at this point, and I'm not a guy that likes to tank. I don't want this team to tank. But at this point, I don't want to risk him getting hurt, tearing his ACL, that injury clause kicking in. The team is 2-8. At the end of the day, if Daboll's going to lose his job, he's probably going to lose it anyway at this point. You just lost to the Carolina Panthers. You're probably not going to beat the majority of the teams on your remaining
Right,
schedule.
the Falcons, the Bucks, the Ravens, the Eagles again.
Yeah. So I think Daniel Jones, and I know they haven't come out and said it yet. I think Daniel Jones has played his last snap, unless one of these quarterbacks get hurt. I think he's played his last snap as a starting quarterback for the New York Giants.
Anthony, what do you think?
I think he's done. I don't think we see him again ever in a New York Giants uniform. I thought, the Panthers game was the nail in the coffin, but I feel like it was kind of a foregone conclusion even before that. The way he played against that team, I mean, to have 0 passing touchdowns against the Panthers defense, that is benchable. That's a benchable offense. And I think that the larger question here, because to me, I think it's absolutely done. He's not going to start coming out of this bye week, but the larger question is he inactive for the rest of the season, or do they just demote him to second or third string? And obviously it becomes a question of that injury clause, which Joe Schoen kind of danced around that question, but seemed to indicate that that's not going to factor into their decision-making. I don't believe him. I think it is going to factor into their decision-making. But let's say that it doesn't, and they just demote him to second or third string. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I think that if you're going to bench him, he needs to be inactive for the rest of the season, because the injury clause isn't just does he get hurt during a game. It's also does he get hurt during practice. If he drops a weight on his foot and he has to have surgery and he can't pass the physical in March, the guy can't even be let in the damn building. You got to keep him out. You got to take his security card or his clearance card and wipe it. He's not allowed anywhere near the New York Giants facility if you bench him, if you have that injury clause in mind. So it'll be interesting to see how the Giants handle that. That's really what I'm looking at here, because he's going to get benched. I think we all know that this is it. We're not going to see Daniel Jones anymore. But how do they handle it going from here? Do they completely take away his ability to get into the facility? Do they make him second or third string? I think that they need to just keep him as far away from the building as possible to avoid that injury clause.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Right.
The Giants aren't going to embarrass Daniel Jones.
That's what I was going to say next. You got to keep him away, in my opinion, to protect yourself from that clause. But then does that create animosity in the locker room? Do you lose the entire locker room? Because a lot of those guys do like Daniel Jones. We don't have any problems with him as a person. We all like him as a person. He's a good guy. He's a hard worker, and he sets a good example in the locker room. He's just a bad football player. Right. So if you do something like that to just keep him off of the field completely when all he wants is to be on the field, you don't run the risk of upsetting him and his agency, and that's that. You run the risk of upsetting the entire locker room and potentially having a mutiny like we had a few years ago when Joe Judge was the head coach. So they have to be careful about the way that they handle this, but he can't see the field, and I don't want him to see the practice field either.
Do we get a big roll of bubble wrap and put him in that, maybe, and he won't get hurt? We'll just wrap him up in bubble wrap.
Might need to.
We'll put him, I forgot what movie that is. Somebody does wrap himself up in bubble.
Is that Little Giants, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know. It was one of those football. Yeah. But, yeah, that's what we need to do with Daniel Jones. Definitely agree. I do believe we started our initial show talking about benching Daniel Jones after the bye because it makes perfect sense. And you have a built-in excuse now. You're especially losing the game to Carolina.
You can also use that spark excuse that he used when he benched Daniel Jones for a quarter or whatever it was, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, when he said he was trying to create a spark.
Yeah,
you have that at you could do that now. You could say the team's not winning. We just lost to Carolina. We haven't won in like a month. I'm trying to create a spark. I'm trying to change.
That's what I'm saying. You have a perfect excuse now, saying, "Listen, we just lost to the right."
I've seen a guy create a spark on this roster. So
I think you better put in Drew Lock. I don't want any more of these extra wins. I'm sorry. I don't. I want Cameron Ward. I want Cameron Ward. Tommy DeVito going to come in there and win 3 games. No, Tommy, don't do it this time. It was a great story last year. That was awesome. But now I'm sorry. I want a quarterback. I'm sorry. I can't do Daniel Jones anymore. But you do. You have a perfect excuse now. You lost to the worst team in football. Well, before, now we're the worst team in football, but they were one of the worst. And he played terribly. It's not like we lost 31-28 and he threw for 326 and 3 touchdowns. You can say, man, he had a great game. He was horrendous. He had 2 red zone interceptions and things that people, I understand he still has his defenders. And all you have to do is watch where the ball is placed. Chris, you and I went crazy on the play where was it to Tyrone Tracy that he threw up? Yeah. There was the interception. We didn't understand the play call anyway. It was a yard. I mean, what is that? But you got to throw the ball to the outside near the sideline and not behind the guy where the defender is. Yeah. He does it all the time. He waits for guys to get open on slants and crossing patterns, and they have to stop their route, or it's behind them, or it's low, or it's over their head. They have to jump. He's trying to get his receivers killed. Anthony, like you said, he's a great guy. Nobody sits there and goes, Daniel Jones is an ass. He's a clown. He's bad for the team. His attitude sucks. He don't throw anybody under the bus. He works his ass off. He tries. You watch the way he runs. It's not for lack of effort.
I respect that part about his game.
I do too.
He's still.
I could go outside right now. I could go outside right now, and I could run as fast and as hard as I can. Yeah. I'll never run a 4.3. I'm not talented enough to do that. Daniel Jones plays hard, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have the talent to be an NFL starter. Not in this team anyway. And there is no doubt in my mind, you do not want to pay that injury clause. He's not going to be your starter next year. We already know that because they tried to make a move for a quarterback this year, and last year rather, and this year we're terrible. We're absolutely terrible. So there's no doubt in my mind, we're getting somebody, whether that's Shedeur Sanders, whether it's Cameron Ward, whether it's Jalen Milroe, whoever it is. We all know who I want. So I'm just going to keep manifesting Cameron Ward. I think that needs to be done because he's a playmaker, and I just like watching him play. We need a playmaker or quarterback. I don't care if he throws it or I don't care. I want something different because I say it all the time. We could draft the quarterback. He could be ass. He could be terrible. He could suck, but we don't know. But we do know what we have in Daniel Jones. We do know what Daniel Jones brings to the table. And it's nothing that wins football games for the New York Giants at all. Let's move on because Chris, I think you did mention this. Anthony, we'll start with you. What did you take out of Evan Neal's performance? Because last week, we probably for a couple weeks, I know Adriana brought it up about what the hell are we doing at left tackle? Why are we bringing these guys in? Why aren't we taking a look at Evan Neal? They do move Illuminar to left, which Chris mentioned, and Evan Neal actually had the highest pass blocking grade on the Giants. I'm pretty sure he was one of the highest in the NFL.
He was like 80.
He gave up one pressure in 42 snaps. Anthony, what did you take out of that? Is it a good performance by Evan Neal? Is it just a shitty Panthers team, or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both. But I think that his pass blocking grade wasn't that high. His overall grade was in the 80s, and it was the highest on the team, but his pass blocking grade was in the 40s or 50s. Even though he let up the one pressure, the PFF has a metric called true pass sets, which takes away play actions and takes away rollouts or hot reads, like all of those. So just true one-on-one blocking opportunities. And on those, he graded poorly. So it actually tanked his pass blocking grade. So essentially what your takeaway should be from that is that a lot of those passing plays the Giants were running had play action and other things incorporated into them in order to ease the pressure and make it easier for a guy like Evan Neal, who is in the lineup. And he still, according to their grading, didn't perform well. And that's whatever. PFF grades are subjective to me. They're not viable. The one pressure is a great stat. What I saw from watching the All-22 the next day, the guy was putting some work in as a run blocker, like a tremendous work. Now, that's probably where we bring up the lack of talent on the Panthers defensive line for the most part and say those guys that he was moving around, they're a lot easier to move around when they're wearing a Panthers uniform versus when they're wearing an Eagles uniform or a Washington uniform. So you got to acknowledge that part of it. However, in the past, when Evan Neal has played bad teams, terrible football teams, he's been the worst player on the field. So for him to be on the field against this Panthers team and be one of the better players, I think that's a positive takeaway regardless. I don't think you can take it away from him that he beat up on a bad team. He had never beaten up on any team in the past. So screw it. I'm taking it away as a very positive step in the right direction. I'm very happy for him. We've all, as Giants fans, given him a lot of shit, myself included, but he played well. And so I'll give any Giants player credit when it's due. And it's absolutely due this time. He was great in the running game. He definitely still has some things to clean up as a pass protector, but he was good enough to get the job done. And I've always said that if Evan Neal could just be good enough to get the job done this season, it's so much better to have an average offensive lineman versus the worst offensive lineman. Like the gap there, the difference that makes on the field, in the run game, in the pass game, all over the field. And even in your play calling, your ability to call plays, going from the worst player to an average player, drastic difference. So he finally played a game where he was at least average or even above, and I'm very happy for him, and I'm very happy that happened.
Chris, what did you take out of his performance?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for the last 3 or 4 weeks that we wanted to see Evan Neal get more reps. I said it the week that Andrew Thomas went down that I thought this is what they should have done. And I understand it, and I think I remember Anthony actually bringing up the point, and it was a good point. Illuminor, obviously, he's a free agent next year. He was pretty vocal about it, that he was not super comfortable playing on the left side. He actually even talked about it after the game I forgot the metaphor that he used, but he basically said it was trying to learn a completely different language. Like it's completely different playing on the left side as
He
opposed
should have
to
used Justin Pugh's example where try wiping your ass with your opposite hand. Remember that one?
Yeah, but no, he clearly wasn't super open to the idea, especially being a free agent. So I get it from a Luminor's perspective, but I always thought this was the right approach. After Andrew Thomas went down, you're bringing in guys off the street. You might as well see what Evan Neal could grow into. Now, what I thought about it after the fact, after I saw him play this week, I said, okay, well, maybe Brasillo wanted to coach him up a bit more and make sure they were super comfortable putting him in the lineup so he was completely ready to go. Maybe they wanted him to go up against a weaker defense to try to build up his confidence as he started to hopefully trend towards being a potential starting tackle again in the NFL. So maybe they purposely took a slow approach integrating him into the starting lineup. That's certainly a possibility, but this is what I thought they should have done the day that Andrew Thomas went down, because there's nothing more important to an offense other than the quarterback than a blindside protector. And there was no way I was trusting Josh Azudu. Like that was a death sentence. So I'm glad that they finally made the move, and it almost felt like they needed to. They had no other choice.
And it's amazing to me, by the way, happy belated birthday, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Happy belated birthday.
Yeah.
29 years old, Chris is. 29.
Yeah.
He's nearing that big 4-0, Chris is.
Almost.
But I'm nearing the big 5-0 because I think I'm 11 years older than you. So yeah, we're just I'm freaking old.
Wow, I'm young.
Yeah,
I'm
you guys are
young.
young.
On this
young.
show, I am young.
Yeah, you're very young. I told you. I think the first time we interacted on Twitter, somebody said, "Anthony looks like he could be Bad Dog's son."
I could see it. I could see it.
Yeah, a little bit. So he's a good-looking guy. Hey, what are you gonna? But in all seriousness, I agree. I don't know what took so. Evan Neal's a 7th overall pick. When Andrew Thomas went down, you should, even if he sucks, you should at least see what you have. He's under contract for what, 2 more years? Is it? This was his 2nd year.
Yeah, he's got 1 more year after this year, unless they pick up the 5th year.
He hits his 3rd year. That's right. He was drafted in 2022,
which I'm assuming.
Yes, he has another year on his rookie contract. But you should see what you have in him. And listen, again, he played good against Carolina Panthers, and like Anthony mentioned, you would always know when he was out there because he got beat by everybody. I mean, he was an absolute turnstile. The turnstiles in the New York subways got less action than Evan Neal did over there. Right tackle. It was pathetic watching him try to block guys, but he did. He played well. And sometimes maybe sitting on a bench humbles you a little bit, and you do start to work harder. When you get your opportunity, you're like, I can't let this pass. I'm pretty sure they're going to go forward with him from now on.
Yeah, you have to.
And we'll see how he does the rest of the year, and it'll be interesting if he does finish off the year well, what they decide to do with him next year. But I was happy to see him play well as well. I don't root for these guys to do poorly. Like, I don't want them to suck. I don't want to have to go out here and scream and put freaking, paper bags in my freaking head when I do my post game. Like, I don't want to do that stuff. But the team frustrates me, man. And, it's just amazing the way we find ways to lose. In 2022, we found ways to win. And I feel like Joe Schoen, the whole time they've been here, again, I mean, we're 2-8, and Bill Parcells says your record is what you say you are, but I do feel like we're at least competitive in a lot of these games. Now, the Eagles blew our doors off, but the Eagles are red hot. They're blowing everybody out right now. Other than that, I think we've been pretty close in a lot of the games outside of week 1, and Minnesota was red hot. They've kind of cooled off now. But there are some good things to take away from this year. And Chris, we'll start with you this time. What do you think about Tyrone Tracy? I mean, I know he had the fumble, and I felt really bad for him. Yeah. And at the same time, I'm like, you're a good actor. You're running the play. We know you were running the play. Oops, I fumbled the ball. Oh my God. What do you take outside of the fumble? I mean, he's been really good with the opportunity.
Tyrone Tracy already is one of Joe Schoen's best draft picks when you factor in value where he was drafted. The guy's an immediate impact player, and I think he's going to be a big-time contributor for the next 2 or 3 years. The other thing that I'll say that this running back group has done for me, and I know Giants fans may not want to hear this, and I hate that he's a Philadelphia Eagle, it has made me appreciate Saquon Barkley. I think one of the most underrated things about Saquon Barkley's game as a New York Giant was his bowl security. Saquon Barkley, as a New York Giant, only lost 3 fumbles when running the football in 6 years. In his first 5 years as a New York Giant, he only had 1 lost fumble while losing the football. He had 2 fumbles his last year as a New York Giant. So it's really made you appreciate how much ball security meant at the running back position. Well, Saquon Barkley was a Giant. He fumbled the ball twice. Eric Gray's had fumbling problems.
Devin Singletary
had fumbling
fumbled it.
problems. So that's one thing that I thought about after the game this past week. Not that I'm blaming the game on him. There are so many other things. You could blame Daniel Jones. You could blame the defense. They couldn't stop the run. You could blame the special teams, whatever. There are so many aspects of that game in which you could blame somebody else. And I love Tyrone Tracy. I think he's going to be a big playmaker. You could correct that. That's correctable. We saw that with Tiki Barber. But the guy is a playmaker, man. He's got great field vision. He's explosive. And the one thing I want to see with Tracy for the rest of the year that I've actually been somewhat underwhelmed with, not in terms of him, in terms of his utilage, they haven't used him in the passing game at all for the most part. And I feel like the Giants have gotten away from that screen game, which was actually working really well.
I don't understand.
For about a month. I mentioned it during the live stream this past week. They haven't used the screens at all the last 3 or 4 weeks. So that's something I'd like to see more with Tracy going forward for the rest of the year. But overall, he's been great. He's been one of the best rookies in football.
I agree. Anthony, what do you think about Tyrone Tracy?
Love him. I think he's spectacular. I think you make a great point, Chris, just mentioning the Saquon Barkley lack of fumbles. And I do think, though, you can, in a cynical way, have another takeaway from that. As great as Saquon Barkley was, a generational prospect coming out in 2018, the Hall of Fame level prospect that Dave Gettleman hailed him to be, said gold jacket player. As great as he was, the Giants still didn't win a whole lot of games with him. And so I think it's always going to be the point where, no matter what, draft a generational running back, it's not the same as drafting a generational player at other positions. And that's why I do like the fact that the Giants let him walk in free agency this offseason. Obviously, it sucks that he's playing for Philadelphia right now, but the draft pick of Tyrone Tracy in the 5th round, similar to Isaiah Pacheco years ago in the 7th round. I think Chuba Hubbard, who we just played, and he had a tremendous game. He was a mid-round draft pick. Most of the best running backs are mid-round draft picks. Obviously, it's great to have those special luxury, signings at the running back position like Saquon Barkley, but I do think in the long run, this is going to look like the right move for Joe Schoen and company to let Saquon Barkley go and just be excited about what we have in Tyrone Tracy. He's going to live in the shadow of Saquon Barkley for the next couple of years while he's the running back here, just because Saquon had such an impact on the franchise and he is such a tremendous player. But as time goes on, we're going to learn that we could just appreciate Tracy for who and what he is. And we're going to be really happy with that. And the Saquon Barkley conversation is going to die out by the end of the year, I think, just because
100%.
The way Tracy's running the ball.
I wasn't trying to insinuate, Anthony, that I wish they kept Barkley. I think they made absolutely.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I think they absolutely made the right decision not bringing him back. It's more so just praising him as a player and how something that I think was overlooked by Giant fans while he was here. But you're preaching to the choir when you talk about the running back by committee. Giants fans should know that better than anybody. Tiki Barber was one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in football the year before he retired. I mean, he was he led the league in scrimmage yards, I think, for 3 years straight, or if you combine his last 3 years, he led the league in scrimmage yards. I think he had 3 straight years of over 2,000 scrimmage yards. You replace him with a 7th round running back in Ahmad Bradshaw, a 4th round running back in Brandon Jacobs, and Derek Ward, who was a 7th round pick as well. And the Giants had the best running game in football. So I am completely on board with you, man. I don't believe in having a superstar running back. It's nice to have. When you have a developed team like the Eagles or the 49ers with a Christian McCaffrey, when you have when you could afford the luxury of being able to trade draft picks when they're the finishing touches to a team. But I'm with you, man. I believe you build in the trenches and you could generate a great ground game with a great offensive line. And Joe Schoen hasn't accomplished that yet, but I think that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to mimic what the Giants were able to do during their Super Bowl years with that great offensive line.
And I think he's making progress on that. Like, I do think that the offensive line, especially in the run blocking, has been so much better this year. Like, I think it's a night and day difference. I felt really bad for Saquon Barkley a lot of the years that he was here because the run blocking was just an absolute atrocity. We always point to those pass blocking grades and the pressures and the sacks because it's just so obvious the Giants aren't able to throw the ball. But I really think over the last few years, the run blocking in many cases has been equally as bad. And this year, night and day difference. It's looked really good in some of these games. Even some of the games where the pass protection's been a little bit of a struggle, I feel like the run blocking has consistently been pretty solid. And there's been lanes not only for Tracy, but also for Devin Singletary. And Tracy's just making the most of his opportunities. Love his breakaway ability. He pretty much just makes one move and then he's gone. And that's really special trait.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I hate that Saquon went to the Eagles. I understand why the Giants didn't sign him. listen, we weren't winning any football games. And if we had Saquon Barkley this year, what are we going to win? We're going to be 3-7. Like, we were not going to be a competitive team with Saquon Barkley because teams just stuffed the box and said, okay, Daniel Jones, you beat us, because they know Daniel Jones can't beat them. The since Tyrone Tracy became the starter, he's averaging 5.5 yards a carry. And we have seen the big explosive home run hitting touchdowns. He had one against Pittsburgh. He had one last week. I would like to see him more in the pass game. He came out, he was a wide receiver, and he was a wide receiver. He changed to running back. But I agree. I think Tyrone Tracy has the potential to be a game changer at running back. Is he going to be Saquon? No. I mean, Saquon is a generational talent. He's playing on a great team. We knew that. And the big thing for Saquon this year is he's healthy. I mean, he is outside of 2022 and 2018. He was never healthy. He never played a full season for us. And that goes a long way. But yeah, I think part of the reason the run blocking is better, you added John Runyon, you added Illuminor, John Michael Schmitz is coming into his own, and you're not facing 8 guys in the box now. They kind of lit up a little bit, although I would still put 8 guys in the box and say, Daniel Jones, you beat us, because we know Daniel Jones can't beat anybody. So I do really like Tyrone Tracy a lot. I think that is one of Joe Schoen's best draft picks without question, which will lead me to my next question.
Bad dog so far, and it's early.
I got to run upstairs real quick.
Yeah. I'll talk to Anthony. This draft class so far, and it's early. I never like to whether it's positive or negative. I never like to judge draft classes too early. I like to let it go over the course of the 4 years of the rookie contract. I think that's important. You saw the evolution of Dexter Lawrence over the course of the contract, Andrew Thomas over the course of the contract, and to the other side of things, sometimes you see players regress off of good starts when you think they're going to be better than what they end up being. So I don't want to jump the gun too much. But so far, Anthony, I look at this rookie class, and you could certainly say some negative things so far about some of his prior classes. But this class, I mean, Andrew Phillips has been a big-time contributor. Tyrone Tracy, big-time contributor. Of course, Malik Neighbors is insane, and I think he's going to continue to be insane. Just wait till he gets a really good quarterback in here. I still think might have been the best overall player in this year's draft class. That's how talented I think he is. The draft class looks, I mean, I think the safety, what's his name, Nubin, he's looked better as the years progressed as well. So I've been really impressed so far with this year's draft class by Joe Schoen. Like I said, you look back to 2022, not in love with that. Kayvon Thibodeau, I think, could still get better, and I still think he's a good player, but probably isn't going to live up to that 5th pick, if we're being honest. The Evan Neal pick is a disaster. The McFadden pick looks pretty good from a value standpoint, but overall, not great, the 2022 class. 2023, we'll see. I still think John Michael Smith could continue to improve and grow. That's kind of we don't know yet. Deonte Banks, he's very hot and cold this year, more so cold, if I'm being honest. Jalen Hyde hasn't done much, so that draft class so far, as much as I think most Giant fans loved that class on draft night, right now, you got to have a lot of question marks. But this past draft class looks great.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you, though, was what you thought about this year's draft class overall. So perfect that you led right in it.
And I'll say for this draft class, I mean, I completely agree with you. All the points that you made on those players, they've all been tremendous. And you also brought up a great point of saying the 2022 draft class, 2023 draft class, as those have aged along, they haven't aged so well. But this 2024 draft class has been an immediate, instant impact class. It's been, in my opinion, it's the class that saves Joe Schoen's job. I think if you had another class like 2023 where these players just weren't making an impact and none of them were living up to the expectations in their rookie season, I think we are talking about firing him. But because we are seeing a lot of these young players show progress immediately and impact the game from day one, it makes us feel a lot more confident in the general manager. So to me, it was a job-saving draft class, very important for him. And it does give us a brighter outlook on the future than we would have otherwise. But the kind of, again, cynical point that I'll make, and I hate to be the cynic on the show, but the Giants have lost constantly over the last 6 years. So
you're not the only one.
So, I'm with you, Anthony. I'm sick of getting excited about draft classes and minor wins, if you want to call a good looking draft class a win. I want to see wins on the field. I'm with you. I think all Giants fans are at that at this point. And as much as I preach patience, man, I understand fans who want to fire Brian Daboll. I do. I mean, it's year. I don't want to, but it's year 3. The team's 2-8. He does make a lot of boneheaded decisions. I get where fans are at this point. I get it. I've been of the mindset I always wanted him to get his quarterback and see where we go from there. We'll see what Mara ultimately decides to do. But I'm with you, man. I am sick and tired of the minor wins. I want to see this team turn the corner. And next year's put up or shut up time. Joe Schoen can't continue to push the cart down the road. I agreed with him in terms of waiting and holding off on the quarterback up until this upcoming year, outside of the possibility of being able to trade up for one last year, which to his credit, he tried to do. It didn't work out. So I agree with him trying to build up what was a really poor roster and cap situation that he inherited, taking it step by step. I agree with him up to that point. I am not saying every move he's made has worked. It has not. But I'm on board with what he's done so far in terms of building the team. But next year, you have to draft a quarterback, and he better produce relatively early. Otherwise, the heat is going to be turned up real fast on Joe Schoen. Real fast.
Yeah, and the last point that I want to make on the draft class, though, because again, I like I said, it's cynical point, and it's not just about the patience and keeping patient with this team. It's the point of having a great instant impact draft class. To me, highlights poor work done in free agency. And I know that's kind of like backwards logic, because obviously you want to see these rookies make immediate impacts, but these rookies aren't making this impact if Xavier McKinney is on this roster, if Saquon Barkley is on this roster.
That's a great point you brought up. Yes. Because this past week, Anthony, I saw the stat. Tyler Nubin has played 99% of the snaps. Yeah. If your second-round rookie is playing 99% of the snaps, what does that say about your roster?
Exactly. It says a lot about your roster, and it says that your roster is far off, which I had to throw that wording right back into Joe Schoen's face. But it's the truth. Like, you see a lot of rookies. You want to have rookies who have time to develop. Like I saw even Jordan Rannon was making a point on social media today where the Giants had players in the past, like they had Shockey, and then they brought in another tight end. And, like you had Amani Toomer, and then you brought in Plaxico Burress. Like, you were able to stack talent in the past, but right now the New York Giants keep losing talent and then replacing it with rookie draft picks. That's not really the way the great NFL teams are built. Great NFL teams draft at positions of strength. They don't leave giant holes on their roster that they need to plug in the draft. It worked out for them because they ended up taking Drew Phillips in the 3rd round, and what a selection he was. But we all saw Hard Knocks. They were desperate to get a cornerback in the 2nd round. They pivoted to take Tyler Nubin, but they wanted to take a cornerback because they knew how big of a need they left it on their roster going into the draft. That's not really the way you're supposed to do things. You're supposed to fill in those gaps in free agency and then hit on those picks in the draft and take the best player available. So again, it's worked out for the Giants this season, but we are having rookies play 99% of snaps. We have a 5th round running back starting games. We have a 3rd round cornerback who's arguably the best player in our secondary. That's not normal. This is not the way this is supposed to look. Just a great draft class. Give him all the praise for that. Awesome job by Joe Schoen and his staff as well. I think we always say great job by the GM, but the GM has a lot of other guys in that front office with him. And I think just credit to all of them. But again, a great draft class, an instant impact draft class, highlights how weak your roster is, that you have that many rookies making an immediate impact. And it also highlights your shortcomings in free agency.
Yeah, I mean,
great point.
He's never really had a good roster. I mean, even when he came in here in 2022, look at the wide receiver core. We had Richie James. We had Kadarius Toney. We had Marcus Johnson. We had guys you never heard of. Darius Slayton has been the best receiver Daniel Jones has had his entire career until this year with Malik Neighbors. There wasn't a lot of talent when he got here, and the talent that was here, he kept. He signed Dexter Lawrence. He signed Andrew Thomas. But there wasn't a lot of – he took over a really bad situation. And I think it was Pat Leonard, and I see why everybody hates Pat Leonard now. And I don't really know much about Pat Leonard. I just hear bad things about him. Put someone on Twitter, said, oh, Joe Schoen needs to be fired. And I commented, I said, so let me get this straight. Dave Gettleman gets 4 years, didn't spend one day above 500 those 4 years, but you're going to fire Joe Schoen after 2.5 years? Joe Schoen took over a lousy football team. And has he made it better? No, not yet. But it does take time to build this stuff. How would you get rid of him in 2.5 years? And then you're going to do this all over again. It becomes a vicious cycle when you're cycling through GMs and head coaches and everything every 2 or 3, 4 years. There's no consistency. You look at the best teams in the NFL, they're consistent. Now, granted, these guys do a good job or they'd lose their job. But how long has Harry Roseman been the GM for the Eagles? How long, has Mike Tomlin
we were on YouTube for it. Eagles fans wanted Howie Roseman gone.
They did.
You go back 4 years ago or so. They wanted him gone. They hated the job that he was doing. Anthony, I want to circle back to the point you made about the draft class because I thought it was a great one. I was thinking back to previous New York Giants draft classes. Jerry Reese's first draft class, he is widely credited for, rightfully so, because they were big-time contributors to that Super Bowl team in 2007. But you even think about that class, which is known as one of the better draft classes in modern Giants history. None of those guys were playing 99% of the snaps. Kevin Boss was a backup tight end until Jeremy Shockey got hurt. Ahmad Bradshaw was the third-string running back for the majority of the year. Steve Smith was the third or fourth wide receiver all year. So those guys, well, they contributed as depth players that, when called upon, were able to make contributions to the New York Giants. So I just wanted to really hit home, as I was thinking about that draft class, how good of a point I thought you made. The fact that, well, it has been a successful draft class thus far. It's not normal, if you have a pretty good roster, to ask your second-round safety to take 99% of the snaps.
That's true. But again, to be fair, the team that Jerry Reese took over from Bernie Corsi was built. It was already built. They had won 11 games in 2005. I know they were only 8-8 in 2006, but they made the playoffs. So that was a playoff team 2 years in a row. And 2007 looked like it was going right off the rails at the beginning of the year. And then they got hot, and then they cooled off, and then they played a really good game against the Patriots. And we all know how the season ended. It was great. This is one of the greatest seasons any fan could ever hope for. It's one we'll never forget as Giants fans. I feel bad for the young guys who have never seen. They don't know that the Giants are actually a good football team at one point, because unless you're pretty much legally old enough to drink, you don't even remember the last time that they won it. You might have been 7 or 8 years old. You don't understand football when you're 7 or 8 years old. You might watch it, but you don't know what the hell is going on. So you can't really appreciate it. So it sucks. But I do think Reese had the opportunity to draft depth players because the core was already there.
Oh,
you
yeah.
had Tiki, Tiki had retired, but you had the great offensive line. You had Eli Manning. So he was able to build where Joe Schoen takes over a team with freaking Daniel Jones. The worst thing I think happened to the Giants was winning in 2022. As stupid as that sounds, that's like the worst thing that happened to them, because they kind of were forced to keep Daniel Jones.
It was a fool's gold season.
It really was. It truly was.
Yeah,
but
well,
you thought
if it went the way the Giants thought, I think Joe Schoen probably envisioned it was probably going to go, which he clearly did, if he's being honest.
He did.
Right? It's why he didn't extend Jones on the fifth-year option. We would have either who the quarterback, Anthony Richardson, thank God we don't have him. Who are the other quarterbacks in that draft? I can't even remember off the top of my head.
Stroud and Young and Levis.
So the only guy that we if we got Stroud, that would have been fantastic. The other two guys, not so much.
Right.
Which just goes to show you, even as excited as we are for these quarterbacks, and hopefully one of these guys work out, whoever we draft, whether it be Sanders, Ward, whoever, it's luck. I mean, you got maybe a 33% chance that one of these guys are going to hit, which is why it's so hard to compete in the NFL, because it's so hard to find a quality quarterback at that position, which is why I'll go back to what I said at the top of the stream. We're not that close, Joe, because if it was that easy to find a good quarterback, every team would be close. So I hope and pray we hit on him, but I got to see the evidence before.
Yeah, I mean, look at I don't know how Anthony feels about this, but Chris, you and I talked about how great we thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be. I mean, everybody's like, this is the best prospect since Andrew Luck. I thought he was going to be an absolute stud, and he has not been. So. I mean, it is very difficult. And again, situations matter. I mean, Pat Mahomes is, the best in the league. He's, the best since Tom Brady. I'm not going to give him Tom Brady status yet. He may be at the end of his career, but he would still be great. But would he be as great if he was not with Andy Reid?
No,
would he be as great if
coaching matters so much?
Right, coaching.
Look at Justin Herbert. Look at Jim Harbaugh and what he's done to the Chargers.
Exactly.
Look at and we've had this discussion before, Bando. Look at almost every great quarterback who's ever played in the league. Bill Walsh, Joe Montana, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. Like, they've all had
Eli Manning, Tom Coughlin. Don't forget our guys. Hall of Fame.
Of course. But they've all had, the majority of them, at least, the very successful quarterbacks have had stability at their head coaching spot, and they've had talent around them. Football is a team sport. There's no doubt about it. And a head coach is probably equally as important to the quarterback. If you could get an elite head coach, there's not many of them, but when you get one, they're so important. Chris, we'll start with you this time. I mean, Anthony, I'm pretty sure you don't want Brian Daboll fired, right? Am I right with that?
No, I want him to play out the year, and This is the thing that I'll say on that. A lot of Giants fans kind of want him to be fired, but you have to look around, just pull up Tankathon and look at those teams that are competing for a quarterback and teams that could also be firing their head coaches. Brian Daboll would get another head coaching job elsewhere, and that should be enough to convince you that you need to retain him for at least one more season.
Because I was going to say, Chris, do you trust? Because, listen, I'm as impatient as it gets. I mean, you know me, guys know me. I've been around a long time. I'm impatient as hell. I wanted Joe Judge gone after 2 years. I wanted Pat Shurmur gone the year he got fired. I wanted Dave Gettleman gone. I wanted Jerry Reese gone. Like, I wanted these guys out. But for whatever reason, I don't know what. Maybe it's because they want a playoff game, and I'm still, basking in that.
Well,
because
and I think you're also just you've said it before. Insanity's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. The Giants have had quick trigger fingers with their last 4 head coaches. You can't keep doing that. You can't keep turning it over. And if you keep doing that, well, what credible head coach is going to be like rushing to take that job? What credible head coaching candidate is going to be like, oh yeah, well let me see what they did with Daboll. Let's go back. Let me see what they did with Shurmur. They hired Shurmur. They let Shurmur, after 1 year, draft his quarterback. Then his quarterback actually looked decent in his rookie year, and then they fired him. Okay, that's not a great start if I'm looking for a stable head coaching job. Then they bring in Joe Judge. They fire him after 2 years.
He deserved it.
He did deserve it. Then they bring in Brian Daboll, who inherits a roster from hell, gets them to the playoffs, wins Coach of the Year.
Right.
Then the next year, the team suffers a ton of injuries. Not excusing him. Had some poor coaching decisions at times, no doubt about it. But has not had a great quarterback since he took the job. And now they fire him without getting his opportunity to take his quarterback. And they maintain the same quarterback the entire time. Oh, yeah, I'm Mike Vrabel. I can't wait to take that job. Right. No, the Giants have to, in my opinion, even though I do get why fans have been more critical of Brian Daboll, because I think he deserves it. Not all of this falls on Daniel Jones. Not all of it falls on Daniel Jones. Brian Daboll's calling the plays at this point. Last year, you used Kafka as a scapegoat, used the defensive coordinator as a scapegoat. You can no longer do that. Daboll needs to take some blame. He's made some poor decisions this year. There's no doubt about it. But I'm not on board with firing him. I want stability. I want him to get an opportunity to get his quarterback, and we'll see where it goes. And if it blows up, you rip it up. You rip it up. You give him 2 years with the rookie quarterback, and if that rookie quarterback doesn't flourish, Daboll and Schoen are gone, and we start over again. But I want to see it through. I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again, because that's how you become the New York Jets. That's how you become the worst, which is where we are now. That's how
that's where we are.
In the NFL. You have to see it through. I'm going to be a man of my word. When they took the job, I said I'm giving these guys 4 years, no matter what. You guys could piss. You guys could moan. I thought it was going to be bumpy. It was a much better start than I thought it would be, and it's been bumpy as hell the last 2 years. But I'm going to see it through. And not only am I giving them 4, if they do what I think they're going to do and they're going to draft the quarterback, I'm giving them 5 before I say I want to replace Daboll or Schoen. That's where I'm at. But I do understand, and I do worry that Mara could have a quick trigger finger with Daboll after this year, because at the end of the day, we could all say this. We could all say what the New York Giants should do. All you got to do is look around the league. Eric Mangini, I think, is a perfect comparison to Brian Daboll. Eric Mangini, first year with the New York Jets, took the team to the playoffs unexpectedly. Eric Mangini, next 2 years the team bombs, he's gone. You look at Mike Vrabel, one of the best coaches in the NFL, 2 bad years in a row, gone. The NFL is a what have you done for me lately league. And if the Giants win 2 or 3 games, would I be stunned? Especially with the recent track record of Mara and the Giants if they fired Daboll? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But am I calling for it? No. I'd like him and Schoen to get 2 more years with the rookie quarterback. That's where I'm at.
Okay. So this kind of led to my point. Do you trust Brian Daboll to develop a quarterback?
I don't know.
That's the question, because to me, Daniel Jones was ruined when Daboll got here. He was never, because it's all mental, and you can't coach that. You can't coach instincts. You can't coach improvisation. Like you can't coach it. That's something a quarterback has or he doesn't. And Daniel Jones has never had that. He's never been able to improvise. I mean, he can run, but he's never been able to escape the pocket and throw the ball downfield. Like we see the best quarterbacks do that. Yeah. They get out of the pocket, they escape, they make plays. At least they try to make plays. Daniel Jones gets out of the pocket and throws it into the ground. Okay. Or he has 2 wide open receivers running, patterns, out patterns, and he 20 yards down the field on 3rd and 1, and he takes a sack. He's just scared. Boomer Esiason's at the best. You need a quarterback with some damn balls to throw the ball. And he has none. He's scared. He wasn't scared. He just said, let me go in there and sling it around.
The quarterback guru thing, Bad Dog, I need to see evidence before I say I trust him.
Josh Allen's pretty damn talented.
You had Josh Allen to work with.
Just fine without Daboll, right?
And let's be fair, that's why Pat Shurmur got the job too. Pat Shurmur had tremendous success with quarterbacks before he became a New York Giant as an offensive coordinator. Case Keenum had like 110 quarterback rating the year before with the Minnesota Vikings when he brought him to the NFC title game. Nick Foles had a 122 QB rating with Pat Shurmur as his offensive coordinator. Pat Shurmur had a lot of success with quarterbacks. Didn't work out well with the New York Giants. So I need to see evidence before I say, I'll give you credit. Josh Allen was thought to be a project, but Josh Allen was the prettiest project maybe in the history of the NFL. The guy was built like a tank. He had a rocket for an arm. And, you had success. You had success with Tua Tagovailoa in college, Jalen Hurts in college. I get it. You had a reputation. That's why the Bills brought you in. But I'm not going to say I trust him, but I just think the Giants have been so unstable in recent years. And the fact that you haven't given him an opportunity, which is really the only reason why he got this job to begin with, if we're being honest. His success with quarterbacks along the way as he moved up through the ranks, whether it be from college to the NFL, you haven't given him a chance to get his quarterback. I want him to get his quarterback. And if he fails, you rip it up. I'm not going to say I trust him. I need to see evidence before I can say. I'm a damaged Giants fan, guys. I've seen this team get my hopes up over and over and over again, and they ripped it up. At this point, I'm like a defeated person in a relationship. I'm just like, whatever. I need to see evidence before I believe, but I want to see him get his opportunity.
Anthony, you trust Brian Daboll to develop a quarterback?
I also don't know if I trust him, but I want to give him the opportunity. I think he deserves the chance to do exactly that. And it's a point that I made on Fireside Giants this week where I kind of feel bad for Brian Daboll in many ways because he was brought here to be this QB whisperer and everything. And his general manager, his best buddy, Joe Schoen, we know that those two are like best friends, kind of just did him dirty by signing Daniel Jones to that contract. It always should have been the franchise tag. I argued it that offseason. Franchise tag was the right way to go with Daniel Jones.
So they would have looking at you would have been good with them letting Barkley walk that year because you can't tag them both.
Yeah, I think you could have let him walk, or you could have signed him to a deal.
But they just tried, and he wouldn't.
Sure.
Sign.
Then at that point, you let him walk. I think they were way too worried about fan base mutiny and not worried about the product on the field. That's what it was. But I say I feel bad for Brian Daboll in the sense he was here, he was brought in to develop a quarterback, and he kind of had, in some ways, Daniel Jones forced on him. I don't necessarily think that he was over the moon, thrilled. I don't think he probably I don't think he was pounding the table, get the contract done for 4 years. I highly doubt that that's how Brian Daboll felt. So he pretty much had the general manager panic because he was put in a very difficult situation because the Giants won that season. They won a playoff game with Daniel Jones. They felt like they had to pay him. They didn't have to pay him. It was a bad idea, and it was the general manager's idea and ultimately his final decision, not Daboll's. So Daboll really just got the short end of the stick there, and he's had to live with it for the last 2 years. So if the Giants do get fired over the Daniel Jones situation, if the Giants general manager and head coach get fired over the Daniel Jones situation, that's really unfair to Brian Daboll to get fired because the general manager's mistake. But at the end of the day, that's what he signed up for. So he's going to have to live with that. But I do believe the track record, the history that he's had with quarterbacks, you're right, Chris. The ultimate project was Josh Allen. But I also think a lot of fans forget that he was a project. Josh Allen sucked for the first 2 seasons of his career. Year 3, though, you could go find all these old articles. Brian Daboll threw out his playbook, rewrote the playbook, and then they had the breakout with Josh Allen. So it's stories like that. When you read certain different iterations of that story, that's where I go, okay, when Brian Daboll gets his guy, he's going to build around that guy, build the scheme around that guy, and we might see it finally pop. I just don't think that the scheme that he's built with Daniel Jones, only Daniel Jones has the ability to properly run it. I think his skill set is way too limited. So I want to see him with a quarterback. The only point that I disagree with you on, though, Chris, I don't want them to play out the contract necessarily, right? The extra 2 years, give them 2 years with the quarterback, because then that would be the 5th year. Then Brian Daboll's contract is expiring. I actually have a different take on this. I think you have to go Arizona Cardinals on this thing. You draft a quarterback next year, and if immediately the quarterback doesn't show returns, the head coach still stinks, the roster is still terrible, you blow it up then and you trade the quarterback before he no longer has any value after that second year. After 2 years, that quarterback's value is 5th-round pick. Like, what could the Panthers get for Bryce Young at this point? It's not a 2nd-round pick like it was for Josh Rosen after 1 year.
So you're of the mindset, Anthony, that I think I disagree with you on that point, but I respect
hire slowly, fire quickly is how I look at it.
I respect your opinion, but I actually think teams are too quick to give up on quarterbacks. Not the Giants, but I think a lot of teams in the NFL, in today's NFL, are too quick to give up on quarterbacks.
I don't disagree with you, though. I don't disagree with you on that point. I do think the league has a quarterback development problem, but at the same point, the Giants just went through the 6-year saga here with Cam Ward. We get way too attached to some of these players. A lot of Giants fans do, and the Giants themselves get really attached to these players. I need this next relationship with this quarterback to not be a blind love and blind loyalty. It needs to be what do you do?
In a perfect world, and we'll have all offseason to talk about this.
For sure.
I would like to see the New York Giants take the Minnesota Vikings approach. I don't know who that quarterback is, but I would like
they have to do
to draft your guy and sign a legitimate, solid veteran starter to start the year. Let that rookie grow over the first 6, 7, 8 weeks of his career, much like Eli Manning was allowed to do with Kurt Warner as the starter. Get Jameis Winston. I don't know. Get a legitimate veteran starting quarterback that can man the fort for 8 weeks, 9 weeks, even a year if things are going well. Let the rookie start. That's my mindset. Like in a perfect world, that's what I would like. But yeah, I disagree with your point that if he sucks through the first year, I would just completely throw it out.
I just want to say Anthony also manifesting Cam Ward because he said Cam Ward for 6 years. I already meant Daniel Jones.
Cam.
So I know he's.
Did I say Cam Ward?
You did, and I hope you're right. I hope we do have him for 6 years, and he's great.
Yeah, me too.
So Chris, here's an idea though. To Anthony's point, say we do take Cameron Ward or Sanders or whoever, and he does start, and he has absolute shit. And we end up with the first pick of the draft.
Yeah.
And Arch Manning is there. I don't think Arch Manning's coming out in 2026. I think he'll play 4 years. I do. Hypothetically speaking, they have a quarterback at number 1 that they love. And to Anthony's point, they're just going to, you know what, the hell with this. Goodbye, Shane. This guy ain't working. Goodbye, Daboll. You done? We're getting rid of this quarterback and we're starting all over.
That scenario, which is exactly what happened.
I think that's what Anthony was getting at.
Right. That is what I was hitting at. But let me clarify my point here.
Let
me clarify it because it's not. I wasn't saying because the quarterback is bad, you're going to move on from them immediately. It's more the team is bad. You're firing the head coach inevitably because of another bad season. I'm not forcing the head coach to take on this quarterback. I'm letting the head coach reboot if they want to. That's so I should have clarified. That's more what I meant because when the Giants drafted Daniel Jones and then they fired the head coach after his rookie season, they were like, okay, new head coach, you have to take Daniel Jones. What if they didn't do that? What if they went and they drafted a quarterback anyway the next year? They could have had Justin Herbert or two.
I agree with that. I agree with that point.
If they wanted Justin Herbert.
Exactly. Dave Gettleman loved Justin Herbert. Had they not forced Daniel Jones onto the next head coach, who's to say that the next head coach also didn't love Justin Herbert and they would have said to hell with Daniel Jones, let's go Justin Herbert. It was
so bad, Anthony, that they had to just knock it all down, which would have to be an Arizona Cardinals situation, in my opinion, where like they have a top 2 or 3 pick again the next year. And you said at that point, you're like, well, Daboll's not a magician. Let's fire him. And if you're bringing in a new GM and head coach, at that point, of course, you let the general manager make the decision. So from that point, I get it. But I'm of the mindset that I don't think it would be that bad. Like if we're talking about as fans that we think we're a decent quarterback away from this team being 5-5 right now. Well, if you take a quarterback with the first overall pick, the second overall pick, he better at least be a decent quarterback. If he's not, you might as well fire the general manager. So I agree when you phrased it that way. If you were going to completely knock everything down, of course you want the general manager to be able to make his decision if he's picking that high in the draft. So I'll agree with that.
All right. Well, on that note, these hours go by very fast. They really do. I love talking. It sucks that we're so shitty. Like, I can't wait. I've been saying this with Chris because Chris and I have doing our show since 2018. And I always say, I love talking about the Giants. I'm just wait till we're good. Wait till we can talk about how great our draft class was and how we're 7-3 and in first place. And look at it. Joe Shane's guys. Look at Cameron Ward and look at Malik Neighbors. He's one of the best receivers in the league.
I'm going to tell you what, we're going to have some Cam Ward and Shador Sanders debates this offseason because I think I'm on the Shador Sanders train. But I do like both of them. But
listen, I'm not going to – it's just like Romo doing saying Malik Neighbors. I'm not going to be mad at either one. Shador Sanders, I don't care. Just not Daniel Jones, man. And not Quinn Ewers. Do not take Quinn Ewers. Do not take Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck over one of those. Cameron Ward, Sanders is it. That's it. You're picking top two. You're getting one of those guys, and that's it. I don't want anybody else. One of them.
And then Milrow enters the chat.
Derek just asked me a question, so I do want to read it. He said, DJ was a great Giant. He played hard every play. If DJ's not going to play, they should cut him now so another team could pick him up. Tana, I've always said that you were fair-minded. Were the Giants expected to win 18 games? I'll answer your question, Derek. No, they were not. 2 games, though. No, I get it. The Giants going into the year were 6-7 games, and we got our answer. Daniel Jones is not the guy. I have no ill, and I'm not calling the fire Brian Daboll. I'm not calling the fire Brian Daboll. It's not what I want. What I am saying is I understand fans that do, and I understand the pressure, much like the Pat Shurmur situation. If you watched me back then, Derek, Bando could attest this. I didn't want to fire Shurmur. I thought it was a decision at times, but I don't want to fire Daboll. I understood at the time why fans wanted to fire Shurmur. I feel the same way with Daboll. I completely understand for fans who want to fire Daboll. I am not in that boat. As far as Daniel Jones, no,
he stinks.
He stinks. Now, I have no ill will against him. And if he goes to another team, as long as it's not the Eagles, like Saquon or the Cowboys, I'm going to root for the guy if he gets an opportunity to start. I think he's a great kid. I think he worked hard. I think from a characteristic standpoint, he's everything I wanted in a New York Giant, much like Saquon Barkley. Everything I wanted in a New York
standpoint, though, he ain't got it, man.
No, he doesn't. No, and he doesn't have it here. And maybe it will get better. You look at Evan Ingram with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I do think a big reason why Evan Ingram struggled as much as he did here, it was a lot of mental problems. He had a lot of drops. Now, Daniel Jones is never going to become a great quarterback. His biggest weakness, his biggest flaw, we all know it at this point, he doesn't scan the field well. And I don't think you can coach that out of him. But if he gets put in an ideal situation like Darnold did with the Vikings with those weapons, could he be more successful? I think he could. And if he gets an opportunity, I hope he succeeds. I have no ill will against Daniel Jones.
One thing I want to say about, everybody talking about he had a great rookie year. And I brought this stat up before. And this is a microcosm of Daniel Jones's career. 3 games that year. In 3 games, Washington, the Jets, the Lions. He threw 13 touchdowns and no interceptions.
Yeah.
The other 9 games, he threw 11 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. He also fumbled 19 times that year. So, again, you get 1 good game every 4 from him. He's never been consistent. He has a game where it's like, holy shit, this guy looks amazing. The Minnesota game, for instance. And then you have a game like he did against the Panthers. You have a lot of games like he had against the Panthers. And the bar is so low for Daniel Jones that when he throws for 193 yards and a touchdown, we go, well, he's not the reason. He actually didn't play bad. That's terrible. The bar's that low. He didn't play bad. 193 and a touchdown. He didn't play bad. It's not his fault they lost. Well, he never wins games either.
Yeah. And the thing with Daniel Jones, Bad Dog, and I want to believe in him. He's so likable.
I don't believe in him anymore.
I know the Giants.
I tried.
No, at this point, I'm done with him. But I wanted to believe in him. In my opinion, he's very likable. I know a lot of Giants fans hate the guy. They've hated him for the last 4 years. I disagreed. I liked him. I wanted to root for him. I wanted him to be the guy.
Right.
But the thing with Daniel Jones, the instances where he does look great, and he had some. The Vikings playoff game, he looked great. The Colts game that year, he looked great. The Saints game a couple of years ago when he brought the team back, I think in an overtime when he looked great. The Cardinals game last year where he's had instances where he's looked great. And I think that messes with fan psyche because I'm one of those fans. There's times where I watch him, I'm like, this guy has potential.
I know.
But if we're being honest, you could say that about most quarterbacks in the
Correct.
Most
They're all NFL players at the end of the day.
Yep.
I think back to Teddy Bridgewater when we played the Broncos. I think opening week 2 or 3 years ago, Teddy Bridgewater looked like Pat Mahomes that day. So every quarterback has glimpses if they have some ability, and Daniel Jones has some ability. They will give you 3-4 really good to great games in a season if you give him 16, 17 opportunities. But the problem with Daniel Jones, he has not been able to string. I don't need every performance to be great. But he hasn't been able to string.
No consistency.
Outside of 2022, I will be fair. I will continue to say that because I try to be as fair as I can. In 2022, given the supporting cast that he had, given what he was asked to do, he maximized that. He was a big reason why that team had as much success as they did in my eyes. He had the lowest interception percentage in football. Say what you want. Say that they babied him. That's still impressive in my opinion. And he did have a lot of big game-winning drives, and he did have a lot of key third down conversions. So I will always give him credit for that season. But he has never proven to be a guy that was even approaching elite status. We were hoping he was going to grow up that year. He didn't. It is what it is, man. He's not the guy. We move on. And we're going to get our guy next year, or at least you got to hope we are.
Cam Ward.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say, though, just to kind of react to something that you said, Chris, the bar being set so low for Daniel Jones. I think it was you who said that, Bad Dog.
Yeah.
I love just looking back sometimes on Eli Manning's career stats. Do we remember how terrible that 2017 season was, right? That's the year Eli got benched. Look at those stats. That is a career year for Daniel Jones. And he was terrible that season. So I know stats don't tell the full story. I understand all that. The rushing production is different. All that shit is true. But at the end of the day, you're totally right. The bar got set so low for Daniel Jones, and it's because of the inconsistent play. He has those flashes every 4 weeks. It's just not good enough. You have to have consistent good play. So, yeah, I think we all realize where we're at with Daniel Jones, and it's time to see Cam Ward bring us back to glory.
Yeah, I agree. On that note, we're going to get out of here. We appreciate you guys watching. If you haven't done so, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, all that good stuff. I think next week when we do this, obviously we'll be coming off a bye. So next week we might not have as much discussion. Adriana will be back, so we'll have the full crew again. We should be able to take some. What'd you say?
We'll get to talk about Germany. I'm curious to see what
we'll get to talk about that, but I'm sure we'll be able to actually take some questions from the chat.
Of course. Yeah.
Until then, guys, for Anthony Fireside Giants, the Entertainah Talking Sports, our guy Chris, it's Bad Diggity Dizzle. And enjoy the rest of your hump day. We gone. Peace.